we are the chosen. In each family, there is one who seems called to find the ancestors, to put flesh on their bones and make them live again, to tell the family story and to feel that somehow they know and approve. Doing genealogy is not a cold gathering of facts, but instead, breathing life into all who have gone before. We are the storytellers of the tribe.
Listen to our history.
Listen.
Greetings, my family. Welcome to our family reunion. As you know, I am Martin Longanbach, your grandfather. I would like to share my story, which is also our story, and how we came to reside in Sandusky County, Ohio. I was born Johann Martin Langenbacher on January 20, 1825. To Johann George Langenbacher and Anna Rock Langenbacher in the small village of Forringen, located in the Kingdom of Württemberg, Germany. This is in the foothills of the Black Forest, also known as Schwarzwald in German. Our family has lived in this community for 2 centuries prior to our emigration to North America. As a child, conditions in Germany at that time were poor, with several wars, poor crops and an economic downturn. Many families were leaving our area and emigrating to North America for better opportunities. Those were very tough times, and the decision to leave were very difficult for my parents. Leaving behind family and friends, knowing that we probably would not return. The risk in travel and the long voyage were big considerations. And, my mother was pregnant during this voyage. So, in March of 1836 my parents, George and Anna, applied to the kingdom for permission to emigrate with myself and 4 of my siblings. Christina, Anna Katerina, Anna, Maria Agnes. Also, my parents were forced to leave behind my younger brother Heinrich. He was only 2 years of age at the time of our departure. We received word that Heinrich had died in November of that same year. My family was approved to emigrate to North America. We had to give up our citizenship to the kingdom. We were approved to leave in May of 1836. I remember packing our belongings, taking only what we could carry. We traveled across Europe from southern Germany to reach our port of sale. Crossing the Atlantic at that time took more than 30 days. It was a difficult voyage. The ships back then were often crowded. People often became sick and death was a common risk. We reached New York and settled in Seneca County, New York near Albany. My younger brother Jacob was born in September shortly after our arrival. About 1841, my parents decided to move west to Ohio for better farming opportunities. We settled in Rice Township in Sandusky County, which is where we established our roots and raised our families. In the late 1840s, I met a Miss Rosina Engler whom I married on January 10, 1850. Together we had 13 children. I continued to farm throughout my life and acquiring more and more land. I also was elected county commissioner in 1872. Rosina and I raised 13 children and had a very prosperous life.
Okay, Martin. Let me tell my story. Hello, my family. My name is Rosina Longanbach, your grandmother. I was born Rosina Engler on April 10, 1833 in Forstetten. Forstetten was part of the Kingdom of Württemberg. My parents were Johann George and Magdalena Seinlein Engler. My family emigrated to North America when I was only 1 year old. My brother George Engler wrote an interesting story of our voyage to America, and the sacrifices endured to survive in this new country. Please, sit back and listen. This is from a speech my brother gave to the Sandusky County Pioneer Reunion in 1901. Sketch by George Engler. On the 28th day of June 1834, our families and the families of George Rank, Christian Donseisen, George Silman, and Christian Leimenstahl left the village of Forstetten, in Germany, for America. I think we were the 4th family that went to America from our village. We stopped 2 days in Paris to see the sights and arrived at Havre de Grace on the 21st day of July, where we had to wait a week for a vessel to take us to New York. There were no steamboats crossing the ocean in those days, everything went by sail. We arrived in New York in the forepart of September, after being on the water for 38 days. New York was not much of a city at that time. Hogs, cattle and horses were running at large in the streets. The whole city seemed to be pasture lot for stock to run on, just as it was in our town 40 years ago. We stayed in New York about 2 days and then took a steamboat for Albany. We camped out on the dock at Albany and the next day took a canal boat for Buffalo. We stayed overnight and the next morning took the steamer New York for Portland, now Sandusky, Ohio. We arrived in Portland after being on the boat for 48 hours. On our arrival there we found the town deserted, as the cholera was raging there. Most of the people had left town. My father, Mr. George Engler, Mr. Christian Don Sison and several others then went on foot to Lower Sandusky, now Fremont, Ohio, to find out where my uncle, Martin Engler, was located. He came to this country the year before we did. When my father and his companions arrived at Lower Sandusky, nearly all of the houses were closed up, on account of the cholera in town, and most of the inhabitants had left for the country. None of them could understand or talk a word of English, and it was hard to find a German in town at that time. When it was about getting dark they went on the hill near where Dr. Rawson's house now stands, and built a fire in the woods, under a oak tree, and stayed there all night. In the morning Mr. Vincent Cordes, a colored man, came up to see them. He invited them to his home, where Mrs. Cordes got a good breakfast for them. The next thing in order was to find out where my Uncle Martin was located. They finally found my uncle in Rice Township, and he seemed to be pretty satisfied. He had about 2 acres of land cleared and a log cabin on it. It was in the fall of the year, and the black swamp was dry and looked nice. We found out different in the spring. Uncle had 80 acres of land and sold my father 40 acres of it. I was about 12 years old and in a strange country. Everything was woods at that time along the river, except a little clearing on the hill above the landing, with a log cabin on it, which was owned and occupied by a Mr. Norris and his wife, a couple of old people. 2 or 3 days after we arrived at Uncle Martin's, Uncle and my father were called out at midnight to bury Mr. Basil Coe, one of our neighbors who had died of cholera. Uncle and my father buried him on his farm, in the woods, by torchlight. They had no more fears of burying a man who died of cholera than any other disease, and thought nothing of it. In a few days after arriving here we made preparations to build a log house on our land. We moved into our new house sometime in November. Our furniture was all new and homemade, and of the latest style. It was made out of good basswood logs, split and hewed on one side. Our bedsteads, table and benches were all made of the same material, not very handsome but strong and durable. After we got settled the next thing in order was to clear some land so that we could plant something in the spring, cleared about 2 acres, and when we got ready to plant in the spring the land was all under water. Almost knee-deep. Father and I went into the water with grub hose and scraped the soil together and made little mounds in the water to plant our corn on. We planted our corn and waited about a week to see it come up. But no corn came up. We examined the hills and found the corn all gone. The squirrels had dug it up and carried it away. In the fall and winter of 1836 the people in our neighborhood began to realize their almost desperate situation. The money they had brought with them from Germany was all spent in paying for their land, houses, and living or subsistence. For about 2 years, they had but little land cleared, the crops were poor, everything was high that they had to buy. Flour was $12 per barrel and corn 75 cents per bushel. You could not go to a neighbor and borrow a bushel of wheat or corn, as they were about in the same situation. And none of them had anything to spare. There was no work to do in our part of the country because people had no money nor anything else. They were all poor with few exceptions. Our German colony consisted of the following families: Michael and Jacob Stull, Joseph Lambert, Michael Smith, Michael Holderman, John Smith, Anthony Reinick, F.J. Reinick, Bernhard Don Sison, Jacob Jenny, Martin Engler, George Engler, Michael Paul, George Rank, and Martin Booz. Some of them were Lutheran and some were Catholics. All lived in Rice Township. About that time an old gentleman, a Mr. Jacob Bolus, who lived up on Muskellonge Creek, and who was a local preacher of the United Brethren Church and could preach in German. Having heard of the condition our German colony was in, he came to our settlement to investigate matters. He saw at once that the people needed spiritual consolation as well as financial aid. He went to work at once to make preparations for holding religious meetings in that neighborhood and preach the gospel to the people. As they had no public buildings or schoolhouses in our section at that time, they held there and meetings in private houses. First in one then another throughout the neighborhood. Mr. Bolus delighted to preach in German. As our German settlers had not heard of German sermon for several years, as it was something new to them and reminded them of old times long gone by, the whole German settlement went to hear Mr. Bolus, and there was quite a religious revival during which about all of the German settlers joined Mr. Bolus's church, irrespective of their formal creeds. Catholics and Protestants joined the United Brethren Church. Mr. Bolus's sermons gave the people new hope and energy, which did much good in the settlement. Mr. Bolus also gave people employment on his farm and in his sawmill, which was great help to them.
The Boluses had come to Sandusky County in 1822 and settled on the Muskellonge Creek. And when we came in 1834 they had large farms cleared up and were considered quite wealthy. Mr. Bolus paid his laborers mostly in provisions, which were most needed by them. He practiced what he preached. And I don't know what in the world some of our people would have done if it had not been for him. All honor to that grand old man. Our neighbors in Sandusky Township were all about Americans, mostly from Pennsylvania and Maryland, who could speak the German language, which was great help to us. There were the families of Peter and Charles Burgoon, Daniel Hensel, David Engler, Michael Reed, 5 Bolus families, Jacob Sr., Jacob Jr., David, Henry, Nicholas, the Reemsbergs, George and John, Samuel Wagoner, and Jonathan Lessler. Our next neighbors were the family of Peter Burgoon. Mrs. Peter Burgoon was a genuine pioneer and a most estimable lady. She was kind-hearted and always seemed cheerful and happy. She could speak German, which was a great help to the neighborhood. She gave our German mothers much good and timely advice and assistance by showing them how to do things in this country, which was highly appreciated by the people. About 1836 the people got together in our section to form a school district and elect a board of directors. They finally concluded to build a log schoolhouse on the banks of Little Mud Creek, on the farms of Charles Burgoon and Jacob Jenny Wright on the line of Sandusky and Rice Townships. Part of the house being situated in Rice Township and part in Sandusky Township. It was kind of a secondary consideration with them. They were nearly all poor and the clothing of the children wasn't any too warm for winter. Besides, most of the parents thought that when children were old enough to go to school they were old enough to work and help clear the land by picking brush and burning log heaps in the winter and scaring away the blackbirds in the summer. 68 years ago our black swamp was considered a howling wilderness. Today it is the garden spot of Ohio. All this change has been accomplished by our sturdy and hardy pioneers and their descendants. When I think back to the time when we landed on the banks of the Sandusky River in 1834, when the country was a wilderness, and contrast it with the country as it looks now, it seems like a dream. There are few of the old pioneers of 1834 left with us. One of the most noted and the oldest one is our venerable Dr. Peter Bograw. He has lived longer in our city than any other man living here today, and in my opinion has done more for poor suffering humanity in the early days of our county than any other man now living among us. Our county was very unhealthy at first, and there was a saying that there were more sick people than well ones then, especially from September to December of each year. Nearly every house in the county was a hospital that had one or more sick in it with fever and ague and bilious fever. There were but few doctors in town then, and it kept them busy day and night to attend to their patients. Our pioneers were generally poor and not able to pay doctor bills. But our generous and humane Dr. Bograw attended to all, rich or poor, alike. It made no difference to him who it was. Now in conclusion, I wish to say that I have been a citizen of Sandusky County for 68 years and probably know as much about its people and their affairs as anyone in the county. I have seen it transform from a wilderness to a garden, and its people from poverty to wealth and prosperity, and all in a lifetime. Thank you for listening to this story. Stories like these, that offer so much detail, need to be passed down more generations like we have done, so our descendants can understand the hardships that it took to build our community and country. The importance of working together and finding the good in people. Thank you, my family.
Thank you, Rosina. Let's talk about our children. As I mentioned, Rosina and I had 13 children. George Henry, born June 22, 1851. George died young. He was only 23 years of age when he passed away in 1874. Franklin Pierce, born September 16, 1853. Franklin was named after our current president. Franklin married Ellen Judith Hetrick and they had 9 children. Mary Elizabeth, born September 28, 1855. Mary Elizabeth married John Christian Odermatt and they had 9 children. Caroline, born December 16, 1857. Caroline married Frederick Smith Jr. and they had 6 children. Amelia, born February 17, 1860. Amelia married Charles Will and they had 2 daughters. Charles Frederick, born February 23, 1862. Charles married Emma Amelia Engler and they had 4 children. And yes, both Charles and Emma are also second cousins. It happens from time to time. William Henry, born May 3, 1864. William married Emma Druckenmiller and they had 2 daughters. Louise Cady, born August 12, 1866. Louise married Obadiah Kearns and they had 4 children. John Martin, born December 31, 1868. John Martin married Bertha Skeeman and they had 2 children. James Israel, born May 15, 1870. James married Edith Skeeman and they had no children. Henry Luther, born April 26, 1873. Henry married Florentine Marie Mailander and they had 6 children. Irvin Benjamin, born September 1, 1874. Irvin never married. Clara Helena, born May 5, 1876. Clara married Fred Thurn and they had 6 children. So, in addition to our 13 children, Rosina and I were blessed with 50 grandchildren as well. That is my legacy. By this date I have several thousand descendants. Let's try and bring them all together.
Hello. My name is Franklin Pierce Longanbach. I am the second child and oldest son of Martin and Rosina Longanbach. I was born on September 16, 1853. In Rice Township, Sandusky County, Ohio. I spent my life farming. I acquired land from my father, that he had purchased in the 1870s. In 1898 I built a home on this land, located on Fangboner Road in Rice Township. Interesting, this home has stayed in the family for quite some time. This home has been passed down to my son, Charles Lester, and then to my granddaughter Evelyn Longanbach Steiger. Her son, Gary Steiger, and my great-grandson currently owns this property. This property has been in the family for over 150 years. I married Ellen Judith Hetrick on December 22, 1874 at St. John's Lutheran Church. Together we had 9 children. Henry Martin, born September 26, 1875. Ida Amelia, born July 4, 1877. John Martin, born October 2, 1879. Harry Edward, born December 19, 1880. William Franklin, born October 26, 1882. Arthur Oliver. Born August 26, 1884. George Reuben. Born February 7, 1886. Estella. Born February 3, 1888. And Charles Lester. Born February 13, 1892.
Hello, I'm Mary Elizabeth Longanbach. I am the third child and eldest daughter of Martin and Rosina Longanbach. I was born on September 28, 1855 in Rice Township, Sandusky County, Ohio. I practiced the Lutheran faith throughout my life. On November 24, 1874, I married John Christian Odermatt at St. John's Lutheran Church. He is the son of Anton Christian Odermatt and Christina Martin. Together we had 9 children, all born in Rice Township in Sandusky County. Our children include George, born on October 7, 1875. Charles Martin, born on August 20, 1877. Amelia, born on March 6, 1879. Ida, born on September 25, 1880. Edward, born on March 13, 1885. Laura Rosina, born on September 15, 1887. Samuel, born on October 2, 1889. Sadly, I lost Samuel the following year. Oscar, born on January 17, 1893. And Lucy, born on June 7, 1897. 9 children over 22 years. I was a farm and housewife my entire life. It was hard work back then. We made our home where, what is now North 53. Near Booktown. A lot has changed over the years, but our home still exists and looks much the same where we reared our family. I want to thank you for continuing the traditions of the Odermatt and the Longanbach family reunions. God bless all of you.
Hello. My name is Louisa Katie Longanbach. I am the 8th child and 4th daughter of Martin and Rosina Longanbach. I was born on August 12, 1866 in Sandusky County. On March 10, 1887, I married Obadiah Kearns in St. John's Lutheran Church. Together, we had 4 children. Lester Irvin, born March 17, 1890. Elvin Chester, born March 24, 1893. On October 12, 1902, I lost a baby girl at birth. And Bernice Ora Kearns, born July 9, 1906, in Fremont. Bernice was recognized by the reunion as attending every reunion up to her death in the year 2000. Soon, you will hear more of my story. Thank you for attending this year's reunion.
Hello. My name is John Martin Longanbach. I am the 9th child and 5th son of Martin and Rosina Engler Longanbach. I was born December 31, 1868 in Sandusky County. I lived my entire life here. On November 18, 1891, I married Bertha Scheiman at St. John's Lutheran Church. Together we had 2 children. Ethel, born September 5, 1892, and Carl Kenneth, born March 2, 1897. I owned the Longanbach grocery store at 323 Garrison Avenue. In 1914, I purchased a larger building on Croghan Street for my business. I was president of the Fremont Board of Education and I was one of the founders of St. Mark's Lutheran Church. I was also elected Sandusky County Commissioner in 1908. I attended many of our early family reunions. I am very happy that it is continuing into the 2nd century.
Hello, my name is James Israel Longanbach. I am the 10th child and 6th son of Martin and Rosina Longanbach. I was born May 15, 1870 in Rice Township, Sandusky County, Ohio. I was a lifelong resident of Sandusky County. On January 18, 1893, I married Edith Shimon in St. John's Lutheran Church. John Martin and I married the Shimon sisters. We had no children. Thank you for attending this year's reunion.
Hello family. My name is Henry Luther Longanbach. I am the 11th child and 7th son of Martin and Rosina Engler Longanbach. I was born on April 26, 1873, in Sandusky County. I married Florentine Marie Meilander on December 12, 1894, in Ottawa County. Together we had 6 children. Neil Casper, born December 12, 1895. We lost our first child a month later. Robert Jennings, born on April 2, 1897. In Sandusky Township, Sandusky County. Harold James was born on June 17, 1900. In Tacoma, Washington. Harold died young, at the age of 21. He contracted silicosis from working in a scissor grinding factory. Bernice Catherine, born on April 2, 1904. In Tacoma, Washington. Lewis Henry, born March 18, 1909. In Clyde, Ohio. Donald Meilander, born March 6, 1911. In Fremont. I was a carpenter and painter for most of my life. On May 14, 1913, my wife Florentine passed away at the age of 40. I still had young children and those years were difficult. A few years later I married Lillian Grease on November 20, 1916. We had no children together. I attended many of our family reunions. Thank you for continuing our family tradition.
My name is Claire Helena Longanbach. I am the 13th child and 5th daughter of Martin and Rosina Engler Longanbach. I was born May 5, 1876. In Sandusky County, Ohio. I married Frederick Thurn on November 3, 1897. In Sandusky County. Together we had 6 children. Raymond, born on January 19, 1899. Melvin, born on February 26, 1901. Helen, born in 1903. Earl, born on May 4, 1905. Mildred, born on May 24, 1912. And Webb, born in 1916. Fred and I resided in Sandusky County our entire lives. We appreciate everyone listening to our story. So many of our stories are lost to time and memory. That is why it's important to come together from time to time as a family. So we can hear and document these stories for future generations. I can't imagine the hardships that my parents and grandparents endured moving from Germany and making a new life here. They were truly pioneers.
This concludes our program for the day. We all hope that you enjoyed it. Our hope was to bring faces to our story to try and bring life to our history. We want to thank you for supporting our reunion for so many years. Our family has been coming together annually for over a century. Milestones not achieved by very many families. We have over 400 years of documented history. But, there is much more work to be done. Our continued search of our ancestors and of our descendants continues. We also want your help in your continued support for our annual reunion. To make it stronger and viable. To remain as a source of our history for all family members. Now and for the future. So, please support it. Financially. And, with your participation. Thank you.